was reported yesterday that Donald Trump will increase the number of products coming in from China that will have to deal with tariffs, and this trade war continues. And just last week, it was reported that the Trump administration is thinking about sanctioning China following their treatment of minority Muslims in their country, which was strange. And so I was curious why Trump, who's been pretty brutal in his rhetoric and his actions toward Muslims, would care about human rights abuses in China. Well, it turns out that it's part of a larger issue that Trump has had with China. And he is approaching our problems with the country in a way that's very different from previous presidents, including George W. Bush and Barack Obama. Now, to be fair, there are a number of issues with China, and Vox did a great job listing all those issues, including the fact that Beijing has stolen US technological and personal secrets for its own advantage, antagonized US allies in the South China Sea, killed or imprisoned more than a dozen American informants, and taken millions of US jobs over the past 15 years. Now, we hear Trump talk about the jobs quite a bit. We hear him talk about how he believes we're being taken advantage of by China when it comes to trade. But this administration isn't really focused on one thing or on a couple of things. It's focused on everything related to China and what we perceive to be their wrongs.
So that's an expert saying that, Bonnie Glaser from Center for Strategic and International Studies. And the reason she says that is now people are concerned that Trump isn't just trying to gain an advantage in trade in one particular area or do a deal with to block North Korean nuclear program in another area, that what he's actually trying to do is actually create a downturn in the Chinese economy so they are not as big of an economic competitor to us.
Right.
But that is a very, very dangerous game to play, because if you have a significant downturn in the Chinese economy, it could have not just ripple effects, but tsunami effects throughout the entire global economy. They're the second largest economy in the world, and it could come back to bite us. But that would require an understanding of consequences and a chessboard and how you do strategy. That's why I thought the most amusing part of this story was a quote from another so-called strategist saying Trump is engaged in a sophisticated form of economic warfare to confront the Chinese. And when I read that quote, I thought, which strategist is saying that he is doing sophisticated form of, I'm gonna make note of who this guy is so I never pay attention to him again. And then I saw the quote is from Steve Bannon. I was like, oh, okay, got it.
Okay, so it's not sophisticated. That's part of the problem. And look, I want us to be, believe it or not, I want to be fair to Trump because there are issues with China and we've had issues with China. And the approach from previous presidents has been very different. The approach has been more diplomatic because the thinking was, and I think that I agree more with this than the way Trump is handling it, if we try to engage with them in a diplomatic way and we actually open up the economic possibilities with China, there's a possibility that they are more willing to work with us and do something about the human rights abuses that they're committing in their own country. Just as one example. But no, Trump comes in and he's like, I'm gonna crush them. So tariffs. Just random, sporadic, arbitrary tariffs. I'm gonna slap them onto Chinese products that we import. And then we're gonna crush their economy. And then they're gonna be so desperate that they're gonna do what we want them to do. But it doesn't work that way.
I'm not sure that I agree fully with either option. So the Bush-Obama option was total engagement. So if we bring them into the developed countries and we do an engagement policy where we consider them quote unquote responsible stakeholders, that they will then act in a responsible way. Look, I get the upsides of it, and they have joined the world community in other ways and fostered trade, et cetera, that has been positive. On the other hand, it is a tiny bit naive. So what they are much more likely to do is what they've done. Thank you very much for all the things that you've given me. I'm still gonna go and take your secrets and do the cyber attacks and take every advantage that I can. And it's a relatively smart strategy, but they do it behind the scenes so they don't seem like the bad guys. Now, Trump, on the other hand, comes in like a bull in a China shop, if you will, and he comes in and goes, "Me do tariffs, me attack you." Well, okay, but you were so unsophisticated. Now we look like the bad guys.
Okay, so look, the way that Obama and Bush handled it, I get it. There is a certain level of, being naive and thinking, oh, if we work with them, they're going to give us what we want. And of course, it didn't really work out that way. However, there are some major issues where it did work out to our advantage. So for instance, look, one of the bigger factors in North Korea being a threat to the United States or to any other country with their nuclear capabilities, quickly developing nuclear capabilities, is, hey, you know what? There's China, and China is really the only country that continues to support North Korea. So if we can get China to agree with us and to actually impose these sanctions, economic sanctions against North Korea, well, then you strip Kim Jong-un of some of his power. But here's the thing. China had agreed to do that. China had agreed to play along with the sanctions until Trump started attacking them ruthlessly and incessantly and started going after them with these tariffs. And now they're like, no, we're going to open up our relations with North Korea again. We're going to go ahead and help them out economically again, and that's what's happening right now. So look, I think that there's some middle ground. I'm not a foreign policy expert. I don't know exactly what that middle ground is. I do know that I would prefer the Obama-Bush strategy way more than what we're seeing with Trump. And remember, there's also the added after effect of increased consumer prices here in the United States. Because one of the things that Trump thinks is going to happen is, all right, well, Apple, for instance, relies heavily on Chinese labor to make its products. And so if the tariffs are high, maybe Apple will bring jobs back here to the United States. Except Apple has said, no, we are not going to do that. We are going to, they literally said, we're going to pass the costs on to the consumers. So Trump hasn't thought any of this through. He just thinks by bullying China, they're going to go ahead and cave or concede to what he wants. But it's not working out that way.
So look, I'll give you my quick take on what I would do instead. But first, to Anna's question, it's just a no-brainer. Is a Bush-Obama policy that I think is a little too trusting versus the Trump policy of break everything in your path? No, of course I'd take Bush-Obama in those two situations. Just if those are the only two choices. Trump doesn't even realize the overall Chinese strategy is to wait him out. They're like, at most, he's going to be in office 6 years. That's the law in America. Whereas Xi, the leader of China, has basically declared that he's going to stay there for life. So he's like, we'll just wait for a new administration. So if I was in charge, I would realize that dynamic and realize, hey, I can't play the long game here because they have a much easier way of waiting us out than we do of affecting them in the long run. Besides which, I don't want to crash their economy. That is obviously going to have effects on us. So I would do likewise. Like, for example, the Chinese, we believe they hacked into the Office of Personnel Management and stole sensitive information on millions of Americans. So what would I do? I would hack into all of for every system of ours that they broke into or government office of ours that they attacked with a cyber attack, I would do 3 times as much to them. But publicly, I'd say, oh my gosh, China had a cyber attack against them where all the sensitive information, their sensitive information is now in the hands of other people. Well, golly gee, I wouldn't know anything about that. As the Chinese wouldn't know anything about the attacks against us. Yeah. Well, I can't imagine who would be doing that. So you would send a message to China, look, my button is bigger than yours. Okay, you want to attack us, we'll attack you, but we're not going to get caught with our hand in the cookie jar. Why? Why is that relevant? Because you want to appeal to other nations to work with you instead of China, including on trade deals, so that helps lift your economy up. Instead, what has happened, because as Trump's lawyer called him, he's a goddamn dumbbell. So now China has run into the open arms of the rest of the world, including
Russia. Yeah, so I'm glad you brought that up because that's an important part of this equation as well. Look, the United States is not the only country in the world, right? We are not the most powerful country in the world. Yes, we're powerful, but you also have to keep in mind that there are other countries with massive economies that China can do business with, and that's exactly what's happening right now. They decided, hey, you know what? Let's increase business with Russia and Iran. And so these are like the after effects of Trump's policies, his ridiculous, not so well thought out policies are not so good for Americans. Like, while he thinks that he's actually helping Americans and he's attempting to bring jobs here, he's not. I think that there is a way to do it. And I'm not saying you let China do whatever it wants, but the way that Trump has handled this has been childish. He hasn't thought it through. It's unnuanced. And so, I mean, we'll see what happens. But China has already responded to the latest round of tariffs coming from Trump by saying, all right, well, we're going to retaliate. More tariffs for America.
The dumbbell really thought that China would just cave. That he'd be, oh my God, you put tariffs on us. I'm so sorry, I'll do whatever you want, Mr. Trump. Of course they're not going to do that. They're the second largest economy in the world. So what did they turn around? So one of the things that Trump did to punish them was, you're not allowed to participate in our war games anymore in the Pacific that we do with 22 other countries. Okay, I mean, that's a debatable strategy. But what did it lead to? It led to China 4 months later making a deal with Russia to participate in war games with them. And then that led to honoring Putin, and Putin honors Xi, and then next thing you know, they're doing more trade, and their boats are being lifted up while we're getting less trade and less good results in our economy. And so, and what is the net result? Remember, Trump is obsessed with lowering the trade deficit, but all it's done since he's been in office is go further up. Just last month, it went up by $31 billion just against China. So it's an epic failure on every front. He's weakened us throughout the world. And then he says outrageous things like this. Look, you can say China's done wrong things. We say it, we just said it on the show. And I told you how I would fight back and it wouldn't be pleasant. But he says we can't continue to allow China to rape our country, and that's what they're doing. Come on, man, you're supposed to do a tiny bit of diplomacy. He says it's an economic enemy because they have taken advantage of us like nobody in history. It's the greatest theft in the history of the world what they've done to the United States.
No, I don't know what you're talking about. I feel like that's a perfect strategy to get China to work with you. Yeah, they'll do exactly what you want after you accuse them of raping us.
Yeah, there has to be carrots and sticks, but if your stick is a chainsaw verbally and actually has no real stick economically, well, you've got the worst of all worlds. You've got a lot of bluffing and a lot of bluster with no actual effect. And it's so even people in his own administration don't agree to this. The Republicans don't agree to this. No one thinks this is a good idea outside of Donald Trump and Steve Bannon. Thanks for watching this free clip of the Young Turks. Don't forget to become a TYT member today. For more exclusive content, join now at tyt.com/join.